What if I told you that one of the richest countries on Earth started with almost nothing? No oil, no gold, no farmland, not even enough drinking water to survive on its own. This chart shows the modern wealth, the gross domestic product per capita, of a few major nations. Up at the top, you have resource-rich giants like Qatar and massive economies like the United States and Germany. But right there alongside them is Singapore, a tiny island with zero oil, no gold, and barely enough physical space to build a major city. A country smaller than New York City, with almost nothing in the ground, somehow ended up with more wealth per citizen than nations sitting on oceans of oil. This outcome was the result of specific decisions made at a speed larger, more fractured nations couldn't match. To understand how unlikely this is, we have to rewind to 1965, when Singapore became an independent country. Its unemployment sat near 10%. A massive portion of the population lived in severely overcrowded slums, and the island couldn't supply its own drinking water without piping it in from a neighbor. Its economy was incredibly fragile. For over a century, the island of Singapore had functioned as a British colonial trading post, a middleman port, where goods like rubber and tin were unloaded and reloaded to go elsewhere. It was an entrepot economy, meaning it generated shipping paperwork, but very few actual sustainable jobs. The situation was so bleak that Singapore's own founding Prime Minister, Kuan wept on national television when separation from Malaysia was finalized. Years earlier, he had called the very idea of an independent Singapore a geographical absurdity. He inherited an active, multi-front survival crisis. The government needed to find a way to keep its people alive, and they had to do it immediately. In the 1960s, newly independent developing nations generally followed a predictable economic playbook. Protect your infant industries. You put up steep tariffs, you block foreign corporations from entering, and you try to build everything yourself behind a protective barrier. Singapore did the opposite. They completely eliminated meaningful tariffs. They opened their doors wide and sent a blunt message to multinational companies. If you can compete globally from our island, we want you here. The government weaponized a new agency called the Economic Development Board. Think of them as predatory corporate headhunters. They flew directly to corporate headquarters in Europe and the US, offering foreign CEOs tailored operational packages and tax holidays that lasted up to a decade. The strategy relied on anticipatory infrastructure. Normally, a developing nation waits for a foreign company to commit and then tries to build the roads and facilities to accommodate them. Singapore decided to build the high-end infrastructure first and then hunt for the demand to fill it. The Jurong Industrial Estate is the ultimate example. The government poured massive amounts of scarce capital into dredging swampland and building ready-to-use factories before a single tenant had signed a lease. It was an astronomical financial risk. If those foreign companies didn't show up, the country would face total economic ruin. Singapore staked its literal survival on successfully guessing what global capital would need before the capital even realized it. But an open door and empty factories create an immediate logistical problem. If you have zero natural resources to extract, what exactly are you selling to these foreign CEOs? The government decided to manufacture a brand new national resource, its own population. They made English the standard language of global business and enforced strict societal discipline. By doing so, they created a highly reliable, corruption-free labor pool. They commodified and exported their citizens' competence. By the mid-1970s, manufacturing's share of the economy had grown from 14% to over 20%. Singapore had shifted from a middleman trading post into a high-intensity production economy. Then in 1971, the global order cracked. United States President Richard Nixon abruptly severed the US dollar's link to gold. This shock plunged global financial markets into chaos. Most of the world played defense, trying to weather the storm. Singapore moved instantly to establish itself as a center for currency trading, catching a wave of financial disruption that other nations in the region were not yet prepared to handle. Their ultimate resource was institutional agility. They possessed a unique ability to read global instability faster than larger nations and instantly maneuver to profit from it. In 1965, Singapore's income per person was around $500 a year. Over the next few decades, that line violently arced upward, blowing past the benchmarks of Portugal, South Korea, and eventually the United States, crossing $55,000 by the mid-2010s. A place that started as a swampy island importing its own drinking water is now a sprawling, hyper-modern metropolis, sitting at the same economic table as nations built on endless oil wealth. It's an incredible story, but there is a heavy asterisk attached to it. Developing nations constantly try to copy this exact blueprint, but it largely fails because Singapore's model is uniquely difficult to replicate in a large, politically fractured democracy. First, they did have one massive piece of geographic luck. They lacked physical materials, but they were sitting directly on top of one of the world's most vital shipping lanes. It took vision to exploit that location, but the latent advantage was always there. More importantly, executing this level of rapid top-down transformation came with a heavy political cost. The government operated with rigid authoritarian control. It severely limited press freedoms and tolerated almost zero political dissent. Singapore's wealth and its tight social control grew together. You cannot tell one half of the story without the other. They were built as a single system. Singapore's story suggests that resources matter less than policy. A swamp island with nothing to sell chose to sell trust, discipline, and a government that kept its word to investors. It turned those choices into one of the wealthiest economies on the planet. Singapore's story proves that wealth isn't built by luck or natural resources alone. It's built by decisions, discipline, and the willingness to think decades ahead. If you enjoyed this documentary and want more deep dives into the stories behind the world's richest countries, greatest empires, and most influential leaders, subscribe and turn on notifications. We uncover the real history behind global wealth, power, and success. Your support helps us create more in-depth documentaries that go beyond the headlines and explore the decisions that change the world. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, and share this video with someone who loves history, economics, or geopolitics. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll see you in the next documentary.